This is a video I've been considering making for a very long time, but I just wanted my experiences to bake in a little bit more, really get a good feeling for it all. But this video is going to be about why I'm thankful I left the USA and why I'm also very thankful that I gave up my US citizenship a few years back. So obviously there's some things that people would think of regarding giving up citizenship or leaving the US. One of the main reasons people claim they do it or want to do it is because of tax reasons, but it wasn't a really big factor for me. It was an encouraging factor to start many years ago before I even gave up US citizenship. However, it wasn't my primary driver, to say the least. And now it's not really a relevant factor whatsoever. I just simply don't care in this regard anymore. But anyhow, let's get into the video. So to start off, I'd like to start on a more personal note. So leaving the US many years ago, I guess it would be about 5-6 years ago now, one of the main reasons why I'm so grateful I did it was the amount of personal growth that I had. And the amount of exposure it gave me to just everything around the world. So before living in the US, I was not a very social person, to say the least. I was not very, I don't know, my life just wasn't all that good. My living situation in the US with family and stuff was quite a mess. And I wasn't very used to being independent. I wasn't very used to and exposed to a lot of different cultures or anything like that. All I really knew was I was interested in some Asian food before. And that was pretty much the extent of my exposure to other cultures and ways of life. And being in the US before, I also, I had a lot of bad influences around, as well as bad thoughts in terms of, one example being with fitness and health. The standards in the US are very low, especially in Texas. So you can be overweight and people still say, oh wow, you're really slim. So being outside the US really helped me get in shape. Honestly, I was not in shape. I wasn't taking care of myself, both mentally and physically, especially physically. And leaving the US really it got me into the gym, it got me exercising, it put higher standards on me about my weight, my appearance, how I should look, a lot of different things. And I continue to grow in many different aspects. And this is just one of the things that I'm really grateful for after leaving the US. This is when all the real growth and maturing really occurred with me. So maybe it's not really attributed to leaving the US, I don't know. But it happened once I left the US and I'm really grateful for it. Part of that growth comes from simply the lifestyle that you live. So living in the US, the lifestyle, I don't know, it's miserable to me. You have to take a car everywhere you go because things aren't walkable. Everything's really expensive where you don't really feel like spending money unless you're making, in my opinion, at least 5 figures a month. Below that is just, you're very adverse to spending any money. And just, you don't have interaction with your community, it feels like. You don't feel like you live in a community. At least that was my experience. You just feel like it's nice in some ways. I mean, growing up there, I do have a little bit of me that feels like it's nice to just kind of be left alone if you want to. You can just move out to the countryside and people largely leave you alone. But that's not really the lifestyle I enjoy living. I prefer a more social lifestyle. I prefer having not a ton of people around me. I don't like very busy areas, but I do enjoy some interaction. I do enjoy going to interact with local farmers and stuff like this at a market. The lifestyle in the US is just more focused around work and just being more or less on your own, having your own solitary family unit. While the lifestyle abroad, it varies drastically depending on the country you're in. So this is one thing I'm really grateful for as well, because the lifestyle in other countries allows me to work and live more or less exactly the way I prefer. And in terms of lifestyle, I mean not just a lifestyle regarding the way you live, but also what affects you in your life. So in the US, politics really affect you. You have to really pay attention to it. You have to really understand the direction the country is moving in, or your life will be seriously hampered. Living outside the US, politics honestly don't really matter that much. Like, you don't really have any control, they don't even pretend you have any power. You can't vote in any of the countries you go to, so it's really upfront and clear that it's none of your business. So if you don't like the direction a country's headed, say they're, I don't know, doing woke policies, or they are, I don't know, just some policy you don't like, leave. It's that simple. You don't really have any other choice, so it makes it where you don't have to worry about a lot of these stuff. As well as, quite frankly, the US is one of the most unstable, corrupt, nightmare regimes around the world, in my opinion. It's one of the worst. Versus a lot of other countries, they really focus more on business, they really focus more on developing their country right now. So that might change over time. I'm sure it will. A few countries that I've been to before have started to get much worse politically as well, but it's something that really doesn't affect me all that much, and I'm really thankful for that. Like, I don't have to spend mental energy worrying about politics, who's elected, who's not, what's going on, what's socially relevant. It really doesn't matter all that much to me. And especially regarding US politics, because US politics are just incredibly hostile and toxic. Generally, politics in other countries, it really doesn't feel that way to me. Certain countries, of course. Brazil, horribly toxic and hostile as well. A nightmare. That place, the political system's just as messed up as the US. But other countries, no, it's not that bad. And similar to lifestyle, I'd like to briefly talk about social aspects. So I simply prefer the social behaviors in other countries. I like the people more. I get along with them more, and I share more in common with most people in other countries I've been to than I do with Americans. I don't know why, really. I can't really put a single thing on it. But Americans seem quite deranged most of the time to me, unless they've left the U.S. before. If they've left the U.S. before as well, and have traveled around a bit, then usually they're more well-balanced as individuals. But otherwise, they just don't have a really good world view. They don't really understand the world. People in the US are just oftentimes too US-centric, in my opinion, and they don't understand or care to really understand the world, as well as other societies and ways of living, or anything like that. As well as they are quite, and I say deranged, because they're oftentimes overly focused on certain things that simply don't matter to me that much anymore, such as politics. Rather than things that really truly affect them, like their health and their fitness and different things like this. So I just simply get along better with people outside the US, so it's been a great decision leaving the US. And kind of related to these social aspects, I'm kind of moving on a chain here. Marriage. So in the US, I didn't really have, let's just say I didn't really have confidence I'd find someone I'd actually want to marry and feel safe marrying in the US. I never really found someone I truly fell in love with. I never found someone I truly trusted. And I feel like the quality, in terms of what I was looking for in a lady, simply was not that common in the US. To put it lightly, let's say that. Being abroad, you get exposed to a lot of different other cultures and people, and a lot of them have better values, in my opinion. More traditional values, you could say, but generally they respect themselves more, and they overall, they enjoy a way of life more that I prefer as well. One example being they prefer, or they also want to eventually have kids, raise kids, or something along these lines, versus in the US, a lot of people simply do not even want this anymore. So this is one thing I'm very grateful for. If I didn't leave the US many, many years ago and circle the drain that is Thailand, I wouldn't have met my wife, which would just be, quite frankly, disastrous. So yeah, I'm very thankful for that as well. And now I'd like to touch on a few things that are a little less personal. So safety. It's one other thing I'm glad I left the US about, is safety. The US, in my experience, was not very safe. You had, like, growing up in Texas, I saw a lot of crime. There would oftentimes be gun battle, to say the least. Some shots fired on my street at least once a week, sometimes 1, 2 times a week. There would be drug dealers not too far away. There was a drug dealer, I think 2 drug dealers on my street when I was growing up living. One directly across the street from our house. We've had bullets fly into our apartment, or it was a house, but our house, multiple times. It's just not a very safe place. The US is not a very safe place. There are okay safe parts, particularly if you're in the countryside, it's a bit more safe. But that seems to even be changing now too. And it's gotten much, much worse since I left there. Before I left, we would have issues also with people breaking into our cars just to see if we had something. There wasn't anything exposed. We didn't do anything dumb to make it seem like we had something in the car. And we didn't have anything in the car because we expected someone would break in. However, people would break in anyway, smash your window, get in your car, mess it up sometimes. So it's not a very safe place in that way. And also, I feel like it's not really very safe in terms of the government either. You have this government that's flip-flopping on a lot of things. The police, I don't really trust the police in the US at all. My opinion of them has improved slightly in the last few years. However, honestly, I still don't really trust the police in the US. They're aggressive, they're oftentimes unreasonable, and I believe there's a lot of corruption regarding the police in the US. So you're not really safe from the authority standpoint, you're not really safe from the public standpoint, and there's just a lot of crime. So being outside the US, you don't really have to think about crime. You can go out almost any time of your night in a lot of countries in Asia, as an example. You can go out alone. If you're a single lady, you can go out. It's not really a big deal. In the US, it is kind of a deal. In other countries, certain countries such as Turkey, it's also it's relatively safe during the day. At night, it can be kind of dangerous in certain areas, but it's still not as bad as the US. So the safety is a big factor. It's one of the things I really like about where I'm staying right now, so I can show you real quick. Out here. So, yeah, I don't know. There's a screen and stuff, so it's probably not a good view and all of that, and the window's closed, but I'm staying in China right now, so the safety here is fantastic. You do barely see police at all, if ever. You have some, private security sometimes just for factories and all of that sort of stuff, but you don't really have police, and it's just simply because there's not much crime here. So any of the interactions I've had with police or government people, they're respectful. They're not hostile. They're not aggressive. They're not any of that, which might shock you because I don't know, Western media reports China's a very authoritarian place and all this sort of stuff, but the reality on the ground, it just doesn't seem that way to me. That's not my experience. And, well, it's a very safe country. You don't have crime. You don't have to worry about something getting broken into. My wife can go out. She doesn't, but she can go out at 1 a.m. and stuff to go get something, do something if she wants, and it's perfectly safe. I'm not going to worry about her safety. In the US, I'd be mortified and I'd have to go with her. So we go to bed early, so we're not going out at 1 a.m. here anyway, but it's an example. And the next big thing would be food. So food here, as well as pretty much anywhere I've been around the world. I live in the US and certain Western countries, the food is much, much better outside the US. So in the US, the frozen food is fantastic, just absolutely fantastic, but outside the US, it is not so good. But the fresh food outside the US, fresh fruits and vegetables outside the US are much, much better quality than in the US. I don't know really what is it, but even the farmers markets in the US have not been very good in my experience. In Texas, we found a couple people who would go to the farmer's market and just sell produce they bought from a bulk supplier. They weren't even growing it, anything like this, and they would lie about it. So it's just a lot of dishonesty there as well. We've had a lot of bad experiences trying to get fresh fruits and vegetables and eat healthily in the US. You pretty much have to make everything yourself. But if you don't mind eating some trash or you like convenience, the frozen food is very good in the US. Similar to it's good in the UK and Australia and Canada also, but the US is really best in frozen food. But anyhow, the food outside the US is much better. I prefer the taste of the food. I prefer how restaurants make the food. I prefer the style of food overall outside the US better. As well as just simply the access to fresh fruits and vegetables is far, far higher, as well as healthy options. So yeah, the food outside the US is just much, much better. So anyhow, that's more or less everything I thought to share regarding this. So yeah, I'm really thankful I left the US and I'm really happy I did it. So if not, I wouldn't have met my wife and I wouldn't be the person I am today. So leaving the US 5-6 years ago and giving up my citizenship a few years back was, in my opinion, something I would do again, as well as something that was one of my best decisions in my life. So with that being said, that's the video. If you have any follow-up questions about my experiences or living outside the US or want to share your own, feel free to leave those down below. But with that being said, bye-bye.